You mentioned losing sleep. Cowboys fans have been losing sleep. Look at that transition for months, trying to figure out what in the hell is going on with CeeDee Lamb. So speaking of those videos, I'm driving around. I get a text from one of our bosses that says, hey, can you get us a video on the CeeDee thing? And I said, what CeeDee thing? Only to find out that our own Jori breaks the news. CeeDee, 4 years, $136 million, $100 million guaranteed. Jori, I'm not going to ask if you're surprised. I'm going to ask, in this process, did it go down the way you thought it would?
I think the only surprising thing to me was, by my expectation, this deal is done early, because I was there all through the Ezekiel Elliott negotiation several years back, where they took it down to the Wednesday before the regular season. I mean, there was game plan practices going on. Zeke had held out for 40 days. He was in Cabo for training camp. And then all of a sudden we're at the building. They're getting ready for week 1. And Zeke is back in the building because he had just gotten a deal done. And so in some ways, like, that's good that the Cowboys got the deal done now, so CeeDee can practice for 2 weeks with the team rather than 1, which, by the way, I think receivers probably need less of that type of practice for a quarterback that they've been with for all that time than a running back who's trying to get used to running with the offensive line. I will say, though, like, this is what CeeDee wanted all along. This is what the Cowboys knew was going to happen all along. So the fact that he missed all of training camp is a little bit silly. And if there had been something like, hey, the Jamar Chase deal got done yesterday and after CeeDee got done, then I think we could give the Cowboys a little more grace for pushing this off so long, because there would have been some degree of a new data point. There was no new data point. CeeDee didn't budge to his credit. And that said, I think this was a win-win, because I think this is a win for CeeDee, who now becomes he gets $34 million a year. He's making $100 million guaranteed. That's Kirk Cousins type money right now. And he is making more than any non-quarterback other than Justin Jefferson. And Justin Jefferson is playing on a team that is not paying a quarterback the way that the Cowboys are paying Dak, whether or not they extend Dak. They're already paying him a salary that is about $40 million a year. The Cowboys win because they didn't beat the Justin Jefferson deal. Like, they got CeeDee below that, which, if you're trying to retain Dak and Micah Parsons, which we will get to more in a minute, it's a really big deal to have that at 34 versus 36, and also to have sort of like the, okay, he had a year left and now you add 4, there's a little more cap flexibility.
Yes, a lot of that, all that's true. It just seems like a fair deal for both sides. It's a deal that could have got done a while ago, but whatever. CeeDee will be fine week 1. There's enough time for him to ramp up. But I think we just need to ping pong it back, because the big story here is not just CeeDee Lamb coming in, because now that's done. It's what happens next to the next 2 guys. Because the question the whole time has been, the Cowboys really can't sign all 3 of these guys, can they? And I'll throw it to you, Jori, and just ask, can the Cowboys re-sign all 3 of these guys? Are all 3 of these guys going to be with Dallas in 2025, 2026?
I think they can. The question is, will they? And so I will say, I talked to Stephen Jones, their executive vice president, about this when I visited the Cowboys during training camp. And I was like, you faced something similar with Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, and Ezekiel Elliott several years back. What can you learn from it? And he's like, look, we got it done then. Maybe not in the timeline everyone wanted, but if we got it done then, we can get it done now. And there is, like, as much as the Cowboys took a lot of flack for not being all in this offseason, they, in theory, left themselves that cap flexibility that they can do it. Micah Parsons is not yet really pushing for negotiation this offseason. I expect that to pick up next year. That's what Steven told me, that he's not, like, super urgent for it this year. He's still got the final year of his deal as well as the 5th-year option after that. Dak is really the big question, and I wrote about this week, but I think that the issue is not only do the Cowboys want Dak, it's does Dak want the Cowboys? And I have a theory, and again, I've been wrong many times before, but I have a theory that I don't know that Dak wants this deal done before the season, because right now he can get a deal. He could probably be paid handsomely. He could probably have a little more security. The last time he went into this contract year, he had this gruesome ankle injury where the bone was poking through his skin, and he still got $40 million a year. And what has he done since then? He's improved as a quarterback. He was second in MVP voting last year. Now, granted, he knows, and I talked to him about this, like, his playoff resume is not what he wants it to be. It's not what the Cowboys want it to be. And I understand that is a reasonable knock on him and the biggest one there is. But from, like, an individual standpoint, he has grown since then. And so then if you're Dak, you have to ask yourselves, do you want to just know now, which, by the way, like, it's kind of unclear, like, can this team get over the hump? Or do you want to take this to the spring when Dak has a no tag, no trade clause, and he will have the opportunity to test the market? He can still come back to Dallas if he wants. In my opinion, he'll still have a lot of leverage with Dallas because they don't have a great next option. The likelihood of them picking high in the draft, which, by the way, like, what kind of quarterback class are we really looking at next year, is not so high. And then on top of that, like, okay, Trey Lance did not show he was ready this preseason. The Cowboys need Dak. And so I think, and again, I have Dak on the record saying this to us, is like, he says, I'm free and I'm not in a rush to get this done. I also he understands that, like, even the Peyton Mannings and Tom Brady's of the world, who he's not comparing himself to in terms of accomplishments, but even they finished their careers with other teams. And so I do think that Dak has comfort with going into this uncertain season.
So, y'all, like, there's a phrase my mom used to use. She always used to say it. My mom used to say, somebody pissed in my Wheaties. I don't know where the phrase comes from, but it just means I'm saucy. And I'm going to be honest, I'm saucy this morning. I'm just going to declare that right now, because all I keep thinking about with this Cowboys thing is I'm exhausted by the fact that we do this over and over and over again. Everything that Jori just mentioned is so important to the context, because at the time I was sitting on national radio every day as everybody was yelling, oh, the Zeke deal is not going to get done, and it got done. Then everybody was yelling, well, Dak deal, I mean, the Cowboys don't really believe in him, which, if you listen to real reporters, was never the case. The Cowboys wanted more time on the deal, not less time on the deal. It was just complicated, and the Cowboys do things slowly. How many times are the Cowboys going to take their time doing what they do before we realize that's simply how they do business, and we shut up about it? Like, CeeDee was never going to go anywhere else. Guess what? Mike is not going to go anywhere else, and Dak is going to decide if he wants to go somewhere else. Sure, I'll give you that all day long. But if the Cowboys want to keep him, they'll do it, and they'll do it on their time. And we'll sit here and we'll speculate like we're watching the Real Housewives of Dallas. We are not. We are watching an organization that does business this way every single time. So maybe the Cowboys aren't the problem. Maybe we're all the problem for yelling about the Cowboys instead of taking the context of how they constantly do business into account when we talk about their contracts.
Yeah, I agree with that. And here, agreeing with everything Jori said, we have to look back. Free agency started in 1993. So we have about, 31 years we're looking at. And those 31 years, a quarterback of prime age, not dealing with an injury, how many have hit free agency? The answer is still one. It was Kirk Cousins. That's it. So if Dak does hit free agency, that's why I'm fascinated by it. If Dak does decide, you know what, I just don't want to be Cowboys quarterback anymore, this is just not what I want to do, he would be the second. It just doesn't happen. Teams pay quarterbacks, or they're coming off injury, or they're washed up, or not washed up in Tom Brady's case, but he was 40. He wasn't a prime age. It just doesn't happen where a guy of Dak's age and his ability hits free agency. So I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Cowboys are going to end up giving him one of those back in the day, Alex Rodriguez to the Rangers type of deals where everybody in the NFL decides, oh, wow, okay, we went a little too far there. I seriously think he's going to get $65 million a year from the Cowboys. And that's going to end 65.
Not 60, 65.
I believe that it's going to jump from 60 to 65, just because the Cowboys are going to realize if this guy hits free agency, we have no control over this anymore. So whether Dak deserves that or not is up to speculation. But I think it's going to be one of those deals where the rest of the NFL, almost like the Deshaun Watson deal, where they just say that was too much, and nobody's going to go to 66 the next year.
But Frank,
right?
I think it's going to take Deshaun Watson guarantees, because because Frank, as you point out, the Cowboys can offer anything. But I'll go back to what Jori pointed out. He knows he controls his own destiny. So even if they offer him 65, you mean his agent's not going to say, well, I mean, if the Cowboys are paying you 65, what will the Giants pay you in a year? What will the Raiders pay you in a year? And how much of it will be fully guaranteed? Like, I just think Dak is in this weird spot where he's going to get to do whatever he wants. And I'll then tie that back to what I said a minute ago, Jori, because to me, if we know that Dak really controls this conversation, then we just need to stop talking about the Cowboys side of it. I know we never will, but realistically, I don't think there's anything the Cowboys are going to offer Dak that's suddenly going to make him feel like he shouldn't test the open market if that's what he wants to do. So, like, maybe we just need to all, to use another quarterback, RELAX, relax about it, let Dak make his decision. But I think somebody's going to back up the Brinks truck and give him a fully guaranteed Deshaun Watson. Every dollar of this will be paid out to you no matter what contract, because that's what it's going to take to get yourself a quarterback. And guess what? Having Dak is better than having Daniel Jones. Having Dak is better than having Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. Like, having Dak still has value to some franchises.
Yeah, it's also interesting because when you said getting the Deshaun Watson money, my first thought was just the amount of the guarantees, not the degree to which it was guaranteed. And when I look at it, like Deshaun Watson got $230 million in guarantees. Well, Joe Burrow got $219. Now, it wasn't a fully guaranteed contract. It was $219 out of the $275. But like the values of contracts are approaching what Deshaun was doing. Now, I also don't think people look at the Browns contract with Deshaun Watson and say, I want to do that. That worked out really well for them. I think what's interesting for Dak and the Cowboys also is this question of what's the likelihood they win a Super Bowl together? Because while Dak does need to take accountability for not having his best games against some of the hardest teams and not having his best games in the playoffs, the Cowboys' playoff drought predates Dak by decades. I mean, this is something where we're going back to the 1995 season. And so, I mean, I did some research on, yes, there are quarterbacks who have been with a team for 8 years and then made it to the Super Bowl after. It's pretty rare, but I do think that there's this question that the Cowboys and Dak are going to have to ask themselves, which is, if our goal is to win a Super Bowl, are we more likely to win it together or separately? If you're Dak, like, I don't think you can knock the Cowboys for building a roster. Dak has had competitive rosters most of the 8 years he's starting. He's now going into year 9, and I would say he still has a competitive roster. But there is a lot of BS surrounding the Cowboys. And there was a player I saw in my training camp and offseason tour this year who was with the Cowboys and is no longer. And he goes, it's just football here. Like, it's just football. And I'm like, yeah, you no longer have the entire, like, Dr. Pepper Keurig headquarters overlooking your practice field. You no longer have tours routinely going through your facility. You no longer have a team owner who is on the radio twice a week and talking after the game, and his son is also on the radio twice a week. Like, and I'm not saying all of that means you can't win a Super Bowl, but there is a lot of the distraction. And so I think Dak will have to ask himself, like, what do I want now that I am in a different personal chapter of my life, now that he is a father, now that he is with a partner, his family's in Dallas, but does he want to be there for the next stage of his career? And while I do know that money talks, and I'm not saying that the money is not relevant at all, he has been paid before. And so I think that there could be multiple considerations, not only the money, like a guy who's never had that big contract.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I wanted to make it too, that Dak's leverage here is that he's already been paid. This is really his second big contract extension. Because a lot of these guys who are signing, look at, you got the Herberts, the Burrows, the Lawrences, they don't have that financial stability yet. Dak has a financial stability where he says, I could play this thing out. If the worst happens and I never get another contract again, I'm still set for life. So that's his leverage. The Cowboys can't go to him with some, hey, set yourself up financially for the rest of your life. Dak will say, I already am, guys. I'm just waiting. Just waiting to set some records right now. And that's why I do think the Cowboys have to completely overpay him to make sure he doesn't hit the open market.
There is an element to, and this message is not just to the Cowboys, it's also to Cowboys fans. Because every time we clip something off about the Cowboys and I say something glowing about Dak, I get all these people in my mentions that are telling me I'm an idiot and Dak can't get it done. Okay. Cool. You don't think Dak can get it done. What's your plan B? And don't tell me Cooper Rush. Like, if your plan B is Cooper Rush, just don't press send on the tweet. Like, at some point, what everybody forgets is that you get stuck in this path where you're like, well, this isn't good enough. And then all of a sudden, you want change. I lived it. I'm not saying that Derek Carr is on the same plane that Dak Prescott is. I don't think he is. But certainly, life was easier as a Raiders fan with Derek Carr than it is not having any damn idea who your quarterback's going to be week in and week out. And I think what the Cowboys don't have an answer to, like, it's much easier to split up with somebody if you've already found who you want to date next. Like, there has to be some, what is the next solution? And everybody sits here and says, well, Romo to Dak. Like, they're taking for granted what it means to have a quarterback. I would warn you, that's the same exact thing Patriots fans thought when they got Mac Jones. And they're like, doesn't matter. We got Mac Jones. We don't need Tom Brady. How'd that work for you? Like, this concept that you can just get rid of Dak and suddenly you're still going to be the Dallas Cowboys forgives the fact that you still need a quarterback that can play at the highest level to win in the modern NFL. And last time I checked, Trey Lance ain't him. So I don't think the Cowboys have any other option. Like, you got to overpay, because if you decide you can't win a Super Bowl together, are you winning a Super Bowl with whatever random quarterback you hope you score on in the draft? Like, this is a failed process the entire way. I'm fired up about the Cowboys today.
The conversation about Dak is the craziest thing in sports right now, even crazier than the never-ending LeBron versus Jordan thing. It is people out there. There are people out there, I hear from them, who think Dak stinks. Like, who think Dak is, like, not even a backup quarterback in the NFL. Like, he should be out of the league. He's so bad. And every time I hear stuff like this, I'm like, I don't really need to listen to your opinion anymore, because you don't know what you're talking about. Dak is a very, very, very good football player, but people act like he's just trash. I don't get it. I don't understand why people have freaked out so bad about Dak Prescott, who is clearly a very, very good quarterback, but people talk about him like he should be playing for the Saskatchewan Roughriders or something. It is absolutely mind-blowing how people talk about Dak Prescott.
I think what frustrates me is that you guys are saying really smart things. When Fitz started his comment with, and people in my mentions, and then I got so excited to be like, we need to have an intervention about Fitz reading his mentions. And then you guys said smart things, and I'm like, now I don't know if I can give my ribbing.
Once in a while now, I'm trying to get better about. I'm trying to get better about responding.
A guy who casually like that says, and what people say in my mentions does not read them every once in a while.
No, I've gotten the spot like where I can finally get away from Twitter enough. I did, call somebody an effing moron on Twitter the other day. That's when I finally.
I got that. I got your tweet to me. Yeah, that was really nice. I appreciate that.
Hey, you know what, Frank? Be smarter. That's all. Tweet me smarter stuff, and I won't have to drop F-bombs. All right, real quick. Do you think? So you think Micah is a year away from any conversation? Is there anything? Do either of you believe that Dak Prescott is not the quarterback of the Cowboys starting next season?
I think it's not a guarantee. I would say it's like 70% that Dak is the quarterback of the Cowboys in 2025. So I still think they are the most likely option. But I also think that this season is going to tell us, like, what goes right this season, what goes wrong this season, and then how does Dak, with his leverage, make a decision based on that of what he wants. I don't think that the Cowboys are going to say they don't want him. The question is, do they want him for $60 million or do they want him at $40 million? Because wanting him at $40 million, is that truly wanting him? But I think it is more likely that Dak plays for the Cowboys than anyone else. I don't think it is anywhere close to a guarantee. As a New York resident who has worked with Dak and enjoys working with him, I would like him to play for the Giants or Jets so that he could be local again.
I'll put my percentage higher than Jori's. I don't know exactly what it is. Well, acknowledging it's not guaranteed, but again, I just look at the history quarterbacks never hitting the open market and the way we talk about, this quarterback's going to change teams and they never do. And this Cowboy is going to change teams and they never do. And I just think the same thing's going to happen. And my one prediction is Dak will sign a contract. They'll have everybody freaking out about how much it is.
Yeah, you're right. It's just not going to be with the Cowboys. I will go on record. I think Dak's going to win the NFL MVP this year. I think the Cowboys are going to have an absolutely epic regular season. They will probably fail in the playoffs because most teams do. And by the way, I'm not going to let one game outweigh an entire regular season. Dak hits the open market. I don't know if it's, I've said before, I think it's the Raiders. It could be the Giants. It could be anybody. Somebody is going to back up the truck and they're going to give historic guarantees to Dak and they're going to be questioned for it. And I, for one, am not going to question that because when you have a quarterback, at least you have a chance. We're going to we got to pay bills. Like, we got to be able to pay Dak if we ever want him to be on here. So we're going to pay some bills.
Dak's going to join Inside Coverage next year. Yeah, we're going to pay him $70 million a year.